Welcome to ICU Primary Prepcast.
Hi, I'm Maddie.
Hi, I'm Swapnil, and welcome to yet another primary snippet. So last time we covered work of breathing and efficiency of the lung, two important concepts. Moving on to some of the metabolic side of things, we're going to discuss about lactate in this snippet. So Maddie, can you describe the lactate production in the body?
Sure. So lactate is produced in the body at approximately 20 millimoles per kilo per day, which for an adult is generally about 1,500 millimoles. The majority of this is in the skin, which is about a quarter, and the muscle, which is about a quarter again, that can increase during heavy exercise. And the remainder is the red cells and the brain, which each account for 20%, and the gut, which is about 10%. During pregnancy, the placenta also becomes an important producer of lactate. Now, lactate is a byproduct of glucose metabolism by the glycolysis pathway. So glucose is converted to pyruvate via a series of reactions, and in aerobic conditions, it enters the mitochondria and is converted to acetyl-CoA by pyruvate dehydrogenase, which then enters the citric acid cycle. However, in anaerobic conditions, it's reduced to lactate via lactate dehydrogenase, and this occurs along with the conversion of NADH to NAD. And then within the show notes, you can see a diagram that illustrates this. Increased lactate can therefore be due to increased pyruvate productions or decreased utilization of pyruvate dehydrogenase deficiency or mitochondrial dysfunction, or decreased clearance. So in terms of increased pyruvate production, this can be due to non-specific glycolysis stimulation, such as catecholamines or inhaled beta agonists, like you'll see for patients with severe asthma on salbutamol. Malignancy, so we often see this with patients with leukemia and lymphoma, and this is called the Warburg effect, or changes to the redox potential of cells. So that's in conditions such as DKA or alcoholism. It can also be due to decreased utilization of pyruvate. So this can be hypoxia related, which is one of the classic things that we see for increased lactate. So things like insufficient perfusion, like shock or ischemia, insufficient oxygen content, so profound anemia or hypoxemia, or increased demand, so in seizures or shivering or intense exercise. And pyruvate dehydrogenase deficiencies is another cause, such as thiamine deficiency. So I've noticed actually there's a trend now of most trainees giving thiamine for any patient who's got a non-specifically raised lactate, any inborn error of metabolism, or any mitochondrial dysfunction. So this can be because of inborn errors of metabolism, but can also be due to things like propofol, metformin, linezolid, or cyanide. And then finally, it can be caused by decreased clearance, such as hepatic or renal failure, but I think we'll talk about some of the metabolic and clearance stuff a bit later.
Thanks, Maddie. So thiamine use is increasing in ICU, not just for the alcohol withdrawal, but also for lactate clearance. That's a very good observation. Now, can you describe lactate metabolism?
So lactate is metabolized by three routes: gluconeogenesis in the liver via the Cori cycle, which accounts for the majority, so up to 70%. Gluconeogenesis in the kidneys, which accounts for about 20 to 30%, and oxidation in organs, including the liver, kidney, heart, muscle, and brain, which accounts for the remainder. When the lactate is very elevated, the kidneys do excrete a small amount of lactate in the urine, but this only still accounts for 2% or so of total lactate removal. So the Cori cycle is probably the main thing to understand and know about in terms of lactate metabolism. So lactate is transported in the bloodstream from muscle to the liver and enters the hepatocytes via lactate transporters. Lactate is then converted to pyruvate via lactate dehydrogenase, which is then converted eventually into glucose, which can be released into the blood and then utilized by other tissues for energy. And there's a diagram about this. It's actually more of a circular pattern with the lactate going from the muscle to the liver, being converted back to glucose, and then going back into other cells or back to the muscle. In terms of renal gluconeogenesis, the main substrate is lactate, and this is regulated mainly by insulin and glucose levels, but also by acidosis and catecholamines. So renal gluconeogenesis increases when there is decreased plasma glucose, decreased insulin, or increased catecholamines or acidosis. So it generally in more critically unwell patients, there'll be more of a role for renal gluconeogenesis. And then finally, oxidation in mitochondria within different organs. Lactate is transported from the cytosol to the mitochondria and converted back to pyruvate by lactate dehydrogenase, which is then converted by pyruvate dehydrogenase to acetyl-CoA. So acetyl-CoA enters the TCA cycle, and this results in a number of products, including carbon dioxide, NADH, FADH2, and an ATP molecule. The NADH and FADH2 deliver the electrons, which eventually combine with oxygen to produce ATP via oxidative phosphorylation.
Thanks, Mary. And what's the role that lactate plays in our body?
Yeah, so actually, I learned a lot about lactate for this question, and it does play quite a significant role for just normal homeostasis. So it's a fuel for cells such as the myocardium, erythrocytes, astrocytes, and skeletal muscle. It's a redox buffer, a regulator of fatty acid metabolism, a neurotransmitter, and is involved in autoregulation. So coming first to the fuel for cells, it's the major fuel for mitochondrial respiration, the main fuel for TCA cycle, and it's crucial for energy generation. It's also a substrate for gluconeogenesis, as we spoke about as part of metabolism. It can also be the preferred energy substrate for neurons under some conditions, such as when there's increased neuronal activity. And it can be used as fuel by skeletal muscle by transportation through the cell membrane via certain transporters, MCT1, and then it can eventually enter the TCA cycle and be an energy substrate for muscle, which also increases with exercise. And it's also an energy source for myocardial cells. And during exercise, it becomes the main cardiac energy source. So there's actually, I was reading quite a few articles about how lactate, while it was considered just this sort of toxic byproduct, it's actually thought now to be maybe even the preferred fuel for in a lot of conditions for the body. Then as a redox buffer, lactate is an intercellular redox signaling molecule and helps to maintain homeostasis. It regulates fatty acid metabolism as accumulation promotes fatty acid synthesis in cells, and it can then replenish the intracellular pool of acetyl-CoA, which is required for fatty acid synthesis. It increases the activation of acetyl-CoA carboxylase, which helps to regulate fatty acid synthesis. It also can be used as a neurotransmitter. It regulates neuronal excitability, and it's involved in multiple CNS functions such as learning and memory consolidation. And then it has a role in autoregulation. So there's a hypoxia-induced increase in lactate, which can then improve the transport of prostaglandin E2 in the brain and cause vasodilation.
Thanks, Maddie. So obviously, if you are like marathon runner or ultra marathon runner, you will understand probably better about the lactate metabolism, because it's all about how to time your fuel during the runs or prior to runs, and how to time your carbohydrate intake in relation to your insulin peaks. So there's a lot of scientific reason in sports where they pay quite a lot of attention to lactate, and also how to kind of train your body in both aerobic and anaerobic. It's quite interesting topic. As you said, the more you read about it, actually you understand quite a lot about lactate. So thanks, Maddie. So that's the end of our today's snippet. We'll be back with another snippet in a few weeks' time. Till then, goodbye and have a nice time.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.